I don't know if others of you have found this to be true or not, but it has been for me, that the older I've gotten, the harder it is to make friends. Anybody else feel that way? I don't know why it is, but it's harder to make friends. Doris is back there shaking her head. That's because you're just too nice, Doris. Maybe it's because I'm so mean. Is that what it is? Okay. No, Doris. Oh, now you're really agreeing. Man, I stepped into that one, didn't I? All right, let's kind of walk this back. No, I do. It's harder to make friends these days for myself. Maybe I've become pickier. I don't know. Maybe back when I was younger, I would just take anybody's friend. Yeah, be my friend out there. That's cool. Now I don't know if I want to be your friend. Friends take time, don't they? They take time out of our busy lives, which, let's be honest, seems to be something that we all have less and less of these days. Friends take effort, something that, let's be honest, at the end of the day or the end of the week, I don't really want to exert any more effort, giving time and effort to my friends. Friends take patience. Oh my word, so much patience. And truthfully, I don't know that I have any more patience to give than what I already do to my own family and to myself. For all these reasons, and obviously many more, friends are difficult to come by. And at the same time, friends are incredibly important in our lives. There are times when speaking to a friend for comfort, advice, just a listening ear, a friend can provide that sometimes better or in a more fitting way than turning to a spouse or to a family member or to some other loved one. That a friend can listen and not judge or listen and offer advice from a different perspective that you may not have otherwise gotten. Friends can be incredibly important. Friends can listen instead of attempting to fix things sometimes. Friends, I think, can fulfill a need in most of our lives that just about no one else can. And so, the short of it is, friends matter. They matter. And we all know this to be true. I'm not saying anything that's, off the wall, crazy. None of you are, I think, going to disagree with me on this. Doris might, I don't know. We'll see. I guess I'll get word afterward whether she agreed with me or not. I believe Paul agrees with this as well. As he constantly traveled around on his different missionary journeys with friends, sometimes, he seems to make friends along the way. There are a couple of friends with whom he grows particularly close that we're going to see here in Acts chapter 18. You know about them. You've talked about them before. You've probably had classes about them, and maybe even a sermon or two you've heard about them. Their names are Priscilla and Aquila, a husband and wife duo. They represent two very close friends of Paul's who partner with him in more than just ministry, as we're going to see from reading chapter 18 in Acts. So let's read together and let's see what we can take away from Paul's time in Corinth here. So beginning in verse 1, we're going to read down through verse 17 together. The word of the Lord in the book of Acts. Then Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he became acquainted with a Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently arrived from Italy with his wife Priscilla. They had left Italy when Claudius Caesar deported all Jews from Rome. Those of you who have been coming to my class on Romans, we've talked extensively about this time and the significance that it had in Rome in particular, but really the surrounding region. As you can imagine, all these Jews being deported to other major cities and other smaller communities as well. Priscilla and Aquila were part of that deportation out of Rome, that expulsion from Rome. Paul lived and worked with them, for they were tent makers, just as he was. Each Sabbath found Paul at the synagogue, trying to convince the Jews and Greeks alike. And after Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, Paul spent all his time preaching the word. He testified to the Jews that Jesus was the Messiah. But when they opposed and insulted him, Paul shook the dust from his clothes and said, "Your blood is upon your own heads. I am innocent. From now on, I will go preach to the Gentiles." This is a common refrain from Paul that he gives often, but he never means it. He says it a lot, but this is like, you're going to get grounded, but the parent that never grounds the child, this is Paul. You're grounded, Jews. I'm never talking to you again. And then the next town he goes right back to the synagogue. Then he left and went to the home of Titius Justus, a Gentile who worshipped God and lived next door to the synagogue. Crispus, the leader of the synagogue, and everyone in his household believed in the Lord. Many others in Corinth also heard Paul, became believers, and were baptized. One night, the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision and told him, "Don't be afraid. Speak out. Don't be silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack and harm you. For many people in this city belong to me." So Paul stayed there for the next year and a half, teaching the word of God. But when Gallio became governor of Achaia, some Jews rose up together against Paul and brought him before the governor for judgment. They accused Paul of persuading people to worship God in ways that are contrary to our law. But just as Paul started to make his defense, Gallio turned to Paul's accusers and said, "Listen, you Jews, if this were a case involving some wrongdoing or serious crime, I would have a reason to accept your case. But since it is merely a question of words and names and your Jewish law, take care of it yourselves. I refuse to judge such matters." And he threw them out of the courtroom. The crowd then grabbed Sosthenes, the leader of the synagogue, and beat him right there in the courtroom. But Gallio paid no attention. Let's talk about what we just read. A couple of things, key things that I think are here for us to take away from Acts chapter 7, or 18. I did it again. Acts chapter 18. I don't know why I can't keep 18 in my head. So let's talk about Paul's mission here to Corinth. And we'll begin with talking about his year in Corinth. This is not working. If you'll do it for me. Thank you. We're going to talk about Paul's year in Corinth. So I think it's important first to set up a little bit of info about Corinth before we move on. Because we're going to talk about Priscilla and Aquila and their meeting of Paul and all that. But Corinth was a really, really important city at this time. It was known for its delicacies of all varieties, both good and bad. And some of you may know what I'm talking about is things that Paul said in 1st and 2nd Corinthians about all of the debauchery and all that kind of stuff that's going on there. You can see Paul's letters to Corinth for a long list of the things that he found wrong in Corinth. They are there for the reading. Corinth was a seaport city. And it was actually an important seaport because it was an isthmus that a channel was dug to provide access to two different areas, two parts of the sea in southern Greece. So it wasn't just a seaport city, it was a seaport city. I mean, it was huge, massive. This incredible undertaking of a city at the time in the first century AD. The seaports in the ancient world, as in the modern, were as notorious for immorality back then as they are now. And again, see Paul's letters to the Corinthians for all the ways that he believes them to be immoral. In Corinth, sitting near Athens, as it does, if you look on an ancient map, Corinth and Athens are very close together. Corinth shared a lot of the wealth from Athens. Right? We talked last week about Athens and its prominence and its importance. And as it waned in the years of the Roman Empire, Corinth actually grew and became more robust and more powerful. And there's a reason for that. A couple hundred years prior to Paul's visit that we read about here, Corinth had been wiped off the map. I mean, just completely obliterated. Very few people live there anymore. Buildings were in disrepair because after the Greeks lost power, the Romans came through and destroyed it. But around 44 BC, it got rebuilt. It got refounded and reconstituted as a major Roman colony. Now, we've talked about this before with Philippi and how Philippi viewed itself as a mini Rome away from Rome. Well, Corinth didn't envision itself as a mini Rome away from Rome. It envisioned itself as a Rome away from Rome. It's possible that Corinth was even more Roman than Rome itself. They built structures directly modeled after those in Rome. There was a whole temple to the pantheon of the gods modeled exactly on the one established in Rome. In every way, Corinth was thriving as Athens was dying. And it was doing so off the back of this major empire. Everything was going great for Corinth, or so they thought, except for all the things that were going wrong with Corinth that Paul again points out in his letters. Out in the smaller towns, the emperor and the Roman gods were known, but their rule was less firm. In Corinth, as a Rome away from Rome, the emperor and the gods reigned supreme. So that kind of, I think, gets you a little bit in the mindset of what Paul is walking into. He tells us that he's longed to visit Rome, right? He says that in his letter to the Romans. But in effect, he kind of has. He visited Corinth and stayed there for actually a long time. So into this city, Paul marches, doing what Paul does everywhere he goes, doing what he does best, talking about Jesus, telling others about this Messiah he's met and what he's done for his life. And so Paul carried on in the same manner that he always did. Where did he go first? To the synagogues, right? And inevitably, he tells them, I'm not coming back to you guys ever again. I'm done talking to you. I'm the guide of the Gentiles from now on. And then again, he goes to the next city and does the same thing over and over again, because the Jews inevitably reject the message that he's providing for them. But Corinth actually turned out to be a different stop than all the other towns and all the other cities we've seen him visit on his first missionary journey and now during his second missionary journey. About how long, did he stay at each city usually on his first and second missionary journey? Usually just a handful of days, maybe a couple of weeks. It was a quick, come in, try to get some converts, establish a church here, and I'm going to move on because I got places to go. Well, how long did the text tell us he stayed in Corinth? About a year and a half. At least a year he stayed in Corinth. So, that ought to make us go, whoa, okay, what's happening here? Something different is going on in Corinth to make him stay for so long. Maybe, it's possible that being in a city like Corinth, Paul's going, okay, I can kind of sit back and put my feet up for a little bit. There are some amenities here that I'm not used to out in the sticks, right? Out in these smaller towns, right? Toilets and things like that I don't get other places. Maybe I can hang out in Corinth for a while. And I'm not going to put that past Paul. That would make sense. I would feel that way too, right? If you got the chance to stay in a 5-star hotel or stay in a Motel 8 out in the sticks, what are you going to choose? You might stay in the 5-star hotel for a little while, right? That might be the sort of situation Paul's in. But I think it's probably deeper than that. I think there's probably a spiritual reason that Paul is staying around and a more practical reason. In other cities like Philippi, Thessalonica, Berea, all these other places that we see him go, Paul became an unwelcome visitor. Do you remember these moments? When Paul was literally dragged out of cities, beaten on his way out of cities, stoned on his way out of cities. Often, his stay was cut short because of the mob that grew up there and wanted to remove him. But in Corinth, he stayed much longer. He stayed over a year. And according to the timeline we have, it appears to be the longest stay that he has anywhere in one place since he was in Antioch of Syria back in Acts chapter 11. Now, for us, chapter-wise, that doesn't seem very long, but this is many years. Paul has not stayed anywhere longer than this for a very long time. A couple of main reasons I think he stayed so long. The first, of course, is the friendship I've been talking about, that I started talking about at the beginning. He made friends with these two people, this husband and wife team of Aquila and Priscilla. Now we see that we're told that they ran a business doing the same work that Paul did as tent makers. Now just a quick aside about tent making. This wasn't just that, he made tents like you use for going camping out in the backcountry. They worked with, probably a more accurate phrase would be that they're tanners. They work with hides. They work with animal skins. And one of the main functions of animal skins back in the day was to make big structures, make tents. But honestly, one of the biggest users of those kind of tents was the Roman military. I mean, you think about how many people they had to send out in the field and house, in these temporary structures. The Roman army, a huge contingent of which is found in Corinth, being a kind of Rome away from Rome, a huge city, would have had a very large contingent of soldiers. They can't all stay in the city. They've got to stay outside the city. They need these kind of structures. So Paul meets these two people who are already doing this job. They already have this business going. Seems to be going well. And in some way, Paul either partners with them or becomes they bring him on as a partner, or maybe he's just a hired hand of some kind. But he finds in them a commonality, right? Something that he can relate to with them, that they do the same craft that he does. And what's crazy is this is the first time Luke ever tells us about this. We don't ever get this detail prior, but if you go and read Paul's letters, we actually hear directly from Paul that way back when he was in Thessalonica, he actually worked his whole time while he was there. Now, Luke doesn't bring that up, but Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians 2:9, in 3:11, and in 2 Thessalonians 3:7-13, he worked the whole time, night and day, he says. He worked night and day so that he would not be a burden upon the Thessalonian people, so that they wouldn't have to support him. He worked night and day, and to show them what hard work looked like. So this friendship appears to be one of the main reasons he stays on in Corinth so long. Again, it appears they've set up this nice shop, and they bring Paul on as a hired hand or as a partner. Whatever the case, I wonder how many contacts he made in the city just by doing that work. How many people did he meet? How many other business owners, did he get in contact with and able to network and create a network of people that he could reach out to and draw from and influence, all because he stayed to work for so long in Corinth. And later on, we see his friendship to Priscilla and Aquila as he brings them up in 1 Corinthians 16:19 and in Romans 16 verses 3-5a. And what's really interesting is what he says in Romans chapter 16. This is really important detail we get. He says there, "Give my greetings to Priscilla and Aquila," because by this time they've moved back to Rome. For those of you that have been in my Romans class, you'll know that it's about 5 years after the expulsion from Rome that the Jews are allowed back in. It looks like Priscilla and Aquila were those that at some point had come back to Rome once they were allowed back. So he says, "Greet them. Give my greetings to Priscilla and Aquila, my co-workers in the ministry of Christ Jesus." Now that's not uncommon. That's the sort of thing Paul might say about anybody, right? They're partners with me. He says about Timothy and Silas and all these other people that traveled with him and partnered with him. But he goes on to say, in fact, they once risked their lives for me. What? Where's that story? How come Luke doesn't tell us about that? I want to know what happened there. How did they risk their lives for him? But in some way, they did. And I forgot about this detail until I was doing further research this week about Priscilla and Aquila. And, I came upon Romans 16 again and went, hold on, what? And so I went searching in Acts. It's not in Acts. We don't get this story. I want to know. I want to know what happened here. I want to know how, this is real friendship stuff, right? This isn't just, oh yeah, Paul's my partner. He's my friend. He's somebody I hang out with from time to time. No, this is deep level, real, true friendship stuff. And then he also says, "Give my greetings to the church that meets in their home." So they've been partners in ministry for a year and a half in Corinth. At some point he leaves them, right? And then they go back to Rome. He knows they're there. He wants to, reach out to them because they're friends. He also, says that there's a church meeting, and these are amazing people. Priscilla and Aquila are amazing people. I think it's important that we recognize the value of these two friends, the value that they had for Paul. I have no doubt that they were instrumental in helping Paul both feel more comfortable in staying in Corinth, which, again, led to not only 2 letters. 2 letters that we have, but he wrote other letters to Corinth. We know that for a fact, because he tells us. But at least he wrote 2 letters, long letters, to this one city, this one church community in Corinth, because of the time that he spent there. Paul needed friends along the way, along his journey, to encourage him, to keep him going, right? To refresh him. The spiritual work alone he was doing was draining, often frustrating, and incredibly time-consuming. Now we discover that not only was he doing spiritual work, but he was also working with skins, making tents and other structures, and all the time and effort that he was putting into those things as well. And yet he still had time. He still had patience. He still had effort to give to making friends with Aquila and Priscilla, deep friendship with them. I think God knew that Paul needed friends like them to help him get through this journey. And he needed to stay in Corinth for that time so that he could get to know them well enough and be refreshed by them. The other reason Paul and the others stayed so long instead of traveling on to Rome at this time is that directly in verses 9 and 10, we have God telling Paul, stay here. No one's going to harm you here. Stay here and do your work. So Paul is directly instructed by God, stay put. You're going to be safe here. I'm going to take care of you. Stay put. And I wonder if maybe Priscilla and Aquila weren't part of that. Hey, I'm going to take care of you. He sent them to Paul as well. The other thing I want to talk about from this chapter is Gallio's ruling here. Now, Gallio, we don't know much about him. We get very little detail here. There's hardly anything extra biblical that we get about him, but there is something that I will bring up here in just a moment. So everywhere that Paul travels, trouble seems to brew up, right? No matter where he goes, there's going to be trouble on the horizon. Eventually that happens in Corinth, not for a while, and he doesn't get beaten or stoned or anything like that, like he gets in other places, thank God. Some of it is by Paul's doing. Well, at least the preaching that he gives out, right? Some of it's by that. But really, the truth is that there's been a religious tension bubbling under the surface in the Roman Empire for many, many years. And Paul simply seemed to be the match that got thrown on, this huge pile of hay that was ready to go up at any moment. When Rome conquered the known world, and it happened with all ancient empires, they wanted their new subjects, their conquered people, to worship the way that they did. And so they demanded that of the people that they conquered. It was a means of control. Religion has always played an important part of just about every society we know of across human history. Religion has played an important part. And so how do you control the people that are religious? You control their religion, right? It's a form of control. It's a form of enslavement. They didn't care about conversion. They weren't really interested in whether the conquered peoples cared about the Roman gods. They just wanted to make sure that they worshiped them so that they could control them. But a deal had been struck early on with the Jews, because the Jews had been so obstinate, so stiff-necked, and the Romans knew that. You can just think back to all the times that Israel had been conquered. To the Babylonians, to the Assyrians, to the Medo-Persians, to the Greeks, and now to the Romans. How many times have the Jews given up worship of God to worship the other gods? 0 times. At least as a nation, they've given up 0 times. So Rome comes along as this 5th conquering nation and goes, all right, let's cut a deal with the Jews, because they're just too stubborn to actually do what we want them to do, and let's let them worship the way that they want. And so most of us know about that the Jews kind of had this special relationship with Rome, that they were allowed to still visit the temple. Their temple wasn't destroyed. They were allowed to worship there, offer sacrifices there, when pretty much every other society that Rome conquered wasn't allowed to do those same sort of things. The Jews could continue to worship their own God. Christians, seeing themselves as the natural successors to the Jews, they assumed that this sort of thing, this they were grandfathered in, right? That the deal that had been struck with the Jews also applied to them. But imagine you're a Jew in that situation. Would you be frustrated by that? Because what do you know about the Christians? Hold on, they're not like us at all. They're worshiping some false god named Jesus, right? They're not Jews. You don't lump them in with us, right? You can imagine the struggle then that was going on in the first century. Christians call someone else king, something the Romans would have despised. They don't practice circumcision, so they're not really Jews, right? They allow fellowship between Jews and Gentiles, so clearly they're not Jews. And they've almost completely forgotten the importance of the temple, the physical structure, the temple for worship, and instead said that God dwells where now? Within us, right? These are all things that we know about Christianity. But you can imagine the Jews going, see, they're not like us at all. But what do the Romans see? There's just so much of Jews fighting. They're just arguing with each other, right? About which God is actually the real God. So if the Romans start getting mad at the Christians, who do you think that's going to blow back against? The Jews, right? So they start getting really upset at Paul and the things that he's doing. You can see this dilemma that the Jews are under. So what did the Jews do? Well, they brought their charge against the Christians, and against Paul in particular, that they're breaking our law. Paul is breaking our law. And what does Gallio do? Contrary to what the Jews actually want, what they desire, he rules on the side of Paul and the Christians. He argued that since it's merely an internal argument about names and their religion, I'm just going to let this go. Here's the amazing thing about this. Gallio had no idea the outcome of what this would produce. For decades after Gallio made this ruling, in southern Greece in this area, Christianity essentially flourished and thrived because the governor had essentially argued on their behalf that they're fine. In other parts of the Roman Empire, Christianity was being stamped out, was being suppressed, was being pushed down. In Corinth, it began to rise and thrive because of this one governor who just didn't feel like he had the time to deal with. He sort of treats us as he's indifferent to it, right? I don't care. This is something about your religion, go deal with it. And because of that ruling, Christianity is allowed to thrive. And that got me considering and thinking about other instances that we see in Scripture. When God uses pagans, when God uses people outside of Judaism and outside of Christianity to do his work, whether they realize it or not. I thought about Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, right? And how the prophets directly tell us that God is sending his army. He calls them his army. God is sending his army from the north to wipe out Israel and Judah because of their obstinance, because of their disloyalty, because of their worship of false gods. Well, who is God's army from the north? The Babylonians. Since when are the Babylonians considered God's army? Well, apparently since the time that God decided, I'm going to use this foreign king to do my work, whether he realizes that he's doing it or not. Gallio is another in that long line of God. When God needs something done, he's going to use whoever he needs and bring it about by whatever means he needs for it to happen. There are moments when God needs to move a situation forward. For Christianity to thrive in this area, for it to grow and flourish and to produce fruit, it needed to breathe. It needed to have some room to grow. And Gallio's one decision, this indifferent decision that just because he didn't want to be bothered by the Jews and their argument about their law, it allowed Christianity to grow and thrive. I found that really fascinating this week. And are there ways in which maybe God is still at work in ways that we wouldn't expect? Are there people through whom God might be working that we wouldn't expect? because we're not looking for it. I don't think the Jews were looking for it either. I don't think the Christians were looking for it. But God worked anyway through this governor that we essentially have no other knowledge about. We have no history on. We don't know who he was. He was the governor of this area for probably a short time because they came and went really fast. And yet God uses him for this great task. Are our eyes open to see these sort of moments? Do we have listening ears for God at work in the world, even when we're shut off to it? So a couple of questions to kind of end and wrap us up here to think about. Oh yeah, it's still not working. Don't know why I'm trying. The first is, how have spiritual friends made an impact in your life? But the other side of that is, have you been a good spiritual friend to other people? It's one thing to look at it from the very personal, right? The self-involved perspective of, nobody's been a friend to me lately. Nobody called me. I was away from church for 2 months and nobody said a word to me. Nobody called me. Well, did you call anybody? Did you let anybody know that you were sick or needing some help? I know that we all want spiritual friends, but are we turning around and being spiritual friends to other people? It's not just about me, what can I get? It's about what am I giving to other people as well. So, who's been a good spiritual friend to you in your life? I want you to think about those people because it's good. It ought to make you smile. We ought to all be thinking of somebody right now who's been a good spiritual friend to us. Right? But then I also want us to think about how have we been at being a spiritual friend to somebody else? Because that's equally important. And then the last thing that I want to think about, have you take away is, again, what we were talking about with Gallio there at the end. Have you seen God at work in a situation or in someone that you didn't think would happen? In other words, are you looking for those moments where God may be at work in people or in situations that, boy, I may not have expected God to work that way. Maybe that's God. And what I don't want us to do, please don't misunderstand me, is I don't want us to start describing everything that's happening, good or bad, and going, well, that's God. Well, that's God. Well, that's God. Oh, God sent that plague, or God sent that storm, or God, I don't want us to do that. Right? I'm not asking us to go all televangelist here. Okay? But I do want us to honestly take a look at, are there moments, are there situations, are there people that God may be working through that maybe, boy, the worst person I could think of, there's no way God could ever use them. Well, guess who that was in the ancient world? That was Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was, he was a dictator, John. We talked about that this morning. But he wasn't just a dictator. He was a ruthless dictator. He ruled with an iron fist. He killed mercilessly. He enslaved people. And yet God said, okay, that's the man I want to use to get my work done. So, perhaps could God be working in people in situations that we don't expect? And if so, how do we see those things and how do we recognize that? And then give God thanks for doing this work in the world. That's the good news from Acts chapter 18, or at least part of it. Obviously, as we didn't read or talk about all of it. That's what I wanted to focus in on for today. We have our family time now that we always do at the end of the sermon, where this is a free and welcome opportunity for you to come let us know what's going on. Maybe this morning you need some spiritual friends, and we can be that for you. You need prayers or encouragement, something. Let us do that for you. That's your church family. It's one of the reasons we're here. If you're wanting to come and just let us know about something great, you've got good news to share. We want to hear that too. We all want to smile this morning. We all need a reason to smile. So come, let us know about those things, okay? You can do that as we stand and sing.